p.m. Pacific. Check out therundownlive.com. Mike P. Kriston H. The Rundown, Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Check out therundownlive.com.
What up, guys? We are live here. It is Thursday, December 18th, live here on the Rundown Live, rundownlive.com. Mike Pachesny, Kriston Harris. We should start it off right and let people know that we have a guest tonight, Kriston.
Yes, .com. Yeah, we have Fritz.
No, we don't have .com.
No,
not today.
Not .com today. No.
So maybe someday. That would be a good interview, but no, we
imagine if that was your name, .com.
There is a guy .com.
Oh, is there really? I didn't know
I thought you
this.
knew what the hell I was talking. Oh my goodness.
No, I didn't catch it.
Kim.com.
Age. That's age gap, generation gap there, Mike.
Yeah, you should definitely know Kim.com, that's for sure. But that is not our guest.
No, we actually have a author joining us and researcher, Fritz Zimmerman. He's written multiple books about giant human skeletons, in fact, cataloging them across the United States. I'm kind of interested to see how he got involved and started in this. It'd be a pretty good interview. I'm really excited.
We've done this subject before, so this is nothing new for the Rundown.
But this is the first time I think we've actually, we had Bruce Fenton on, who's a semi-expert. This is a guy, though, who spent a lot of time specifically on the giant skeleton cover-up.
And written books on it, yes. And we should definitely mention that, you yourself have done a lot of research on this topic, so it'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm open, I'm like one of those guys that I believe in aliens, so giants might have been aliens. We really don't know, so it's one of them things.
Did you hear that they found a giant in the pyramids just recently, or in Egypt recently? That was all over. I
heard a story, and we can maybe bring this up to Fritz when we bring him on in a few minutes. We're gonna have to do the site, but something about the 7-foot tall bodies.
Is that really a giant? I see people taller than that all the time.
That's like a lot of shacks.
That's a lot of shacks.
Shacks pretty big, compared to the average.
Well, if you have
person.
20 shacks in the grave, what do you call them?
No, a million shacks.
That's a lot of.
That's a lot of shacks. That's not an accident. Nope. But anyway, let's do the site, Kriston.
Sure. If you guys haven't had a chance to yet, make sure you guys head on down to therundownlive.com. There we have a plethora of information. We put out new articles daily. You guys can share those on your Facebook, on your Twitter, and all the different social media networks that are out there and available to you. Make sure you guys add the Rundown Live. And in fact, right now, you can go to the Rundown Live Facebook and add all your friends. In the lower left-hand corner, you just type their name in, or just choose to add your friends. So we thank you guys for your support. Check that out, therundownlive.com. In fact, the best way to conversate with us is the Rundown Live chat. We'll actually maybe be fielding some questions from there again today, and you can locate us there in the chat at therundownlive.com/live. Also, for those listeners who like to support what we do here at the Rundown Live, one of the best ways is to check out private internet access. Private internet access allows you, Mike and I, to surf the internet anonymously. And even you guys, if you guys purchase it, allows you to download, conversate, do cool things like avoid Reddit bans and video game bans. $39.95 doesn't cover one, not two, but 5 computers, guys. Get together with 4 of your buddies, chip in $8 and get privacy. Let's not forget, privacy is freedom. I think it's as important as antivirus or anti-spyware software. So get a grasp, go to the store, check it out, and if you don't know how to use it, type private internet access in the Rundown Live search bar. It'll pop up with a bunch of information. Also, if you like to listen to the Rundown Live and you can't get enough of Mike and I because we're just so fun, check out the Rundown Live app. The app is free. You can download it from the Google Play Store, the Amazon.com store, the iTunes store, or even the Windows store. It allows you to listen to us at your convenience. You can listen to us on the way home from work, or when you're falling asleep. You can send us your show tips and even email Mike and I straight from the app. It's a wonderful tool. And did I mention it's free? So grab your app, grab your cell phone, grab your tablet right now and download the Rundown Live app. Also, for those iTunes users, on the computer, you can subscribe now to the Rundown Live, and the podcast will daily come downloaded into your
That's really
iTunes.
cool, by the way. And I should mention that I got an email from iTunes today letting people know that for the next week or so over the holiday, all the iTunes podcasts will be delayed. So they're still going to be putting them out, but apparently they're going to be slightly delayed. Just throwing that out there.
Oh, yeah. And for those people who like to listen to us live 24/7, we have a station. That's right, radio station. That's TuneIn Radio. That's another app available for your tablet or cell phone. You can listen to us live, 8 p.m. Central, 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern. I want to thank our syndication, FPRN, Daily Paul Radio, Liberty Movement Radio, Conspiracy Wire, Wide Awake America, and Daily Paul Radio. I think I nailed them all there, right?
Yeah, so, it's such a lot of stuff, and we really got to find a way to condense that. We'll just flash something on the screen really fast, like the Illuminati.
Oh yes, well, subliminal messages.
Yeah, so you know all our networks.
Yes. Speaking of subliminal messages, wasn't it just recently on some cartoon they had Illuminati symbols flashing all about? That might be old news. I forgot.
Well, you're talking about Mr. Pickles or whatever. Yeah, I've watched that show. I watched it. It's not even there's a lot of satanic mumbo jumbo in there, and it's for attention and.
Why not? Let's put it on TV. Anyways, guys.
They put a lot of stuff on TV that shouldn't be on TV. And I also want to mention really quick, too, before we bring on Fritz, that how about this thing about the Sony hacking scandal, North Korea, the movie that people are so worked up about? We haven't even mentioned this. But
this is awesome because I considered writing an article about this today, but I figured since historically, Mike, entertainment isn't something we really get involved in. I didn't write a story about it, but
Corey has a video up. That's what I was trying to let people know. If they go over to the rundownlive.com, we are now posting all of Corey's Liberator rants and the average Liberator, because he hasn't been live lately, so we're trying to get him up on the Rundown Live. So you guys should go over there and check out his rant on the interview. So, you can find out, what's going on with that movie, because we haven't talked about it, and I don't know if we're going to, but
no, probably not.
Kristan, we gotta bring on Fritz. Tell us a little bit about Fritz.
Yeah, basically Fritz is a researcher. He's an author of a book. I actually read his book. It's called The Nephilim Chronicles: The Fallen Angels in Ohio Valley, and essentially his book goes over different dig sites across America, different burial sites, and the way that these giants buried their kin, and it goes over a bunch of different aspects and provides a bunch of evidence on giant human beings. Now I have no idea what made him get involved in this type of topic, but I believe we have Fritz Zimmerman with us. Are you with us?
I am. Good evening.
Hey, how's it going, Fritz? We were just introducing you as an author and a researcher. What made you, I guess let's start out with why giants? Were you digging in the backyard?
How did you even come to this?
Yeah, were you digging in the backyard and you found a big skull and you're like, well, this is weird? Or what made you decide the topic of Nephilim and giants?
Well, actually, I was just going to see if I could find a few burial mounds around this area of northern Indiana to photograph, because despite having a double major from Purdue University, one of them being history, I didn't know anything about burial mounds. We never touched on that. Never even touched on it. And that's with a college education. And in the research, I found a couple, and then I found a couple more. Here in Fort Wayne, we have the second largest genealogical library in the country, so I basically have a county history from every county in the U.S., just about. So the search was on. First it was 10, then 20, then 30, and eventually, after about 8,000 books, I had over 300 of them. And now I have actually 700 of them, but there's 300 in the book. So that, a little obsessive compulsive behavior, and 10 years later we have
amazing. That's amazing. And these mounds pop up all over. I've noticed that
they're
everywhere.
Here in Wisconsin, right?
Tons
Isn't that some
them.
of the oldest?
Yep, all over here in Wisconsin. In fact, in Beloit, they unearthed giants, West Bend, all over. Delavan, Racine. Pierre Hoy is the guy that was heavily involved in unearthing these, as you call them, effigy mounds, I believe is the proper name for them.
Yes. Yeah, a little bit different animal up your way, but tied in culturally to the Ohio Valley. But yeah, even in Wisconsin, quite a few reports of giant skeletons. And not only that, but the skulls they described as primitive, almost Neanderthal-like.
Well, that's amazing. I think that's fantastic. So what are some of the anomalies that you were finding while researching these mounds?
Anomalies in what way?
Well, as far as skeletons and newspaper articles, was there anything odd or weird that you found out that made you...
What made them unique, I think?
Yeah, what made you all of a sudden decide that there were Nephilim or giants, per se?
A lot of it had to do with the skull types, which would be more described as Upper Paleolithic, more archaic, protruding brow ridge, massive jaw, somewhat of a sloped forehead. Some to a minor degree. Some, like I said, like we have a bunch that, they have basically no foreheads, and it would be hard to distinguish actually some of them from almost Neanderthal-looking skulls. So strange skull types, and then finding those and then comparing those to some other skull types that we had found of large skeletons around the world, and then kind of putting the story together. Basically two waves of migration, one about 7,000 BC, another around the Bronze Age of about 2,800 BC. So every giant isn't the same. It's kind of determining the wave that they came in. Wisconsin, you're in the first wave. Real early giants.
Well, and that's interesting, Fritz, because you were mentioning the almost no forehead, and I know we've had Brian Forrester on, and he talked about the Paracas skulls, which were like the massive skull heads.
Well, now keeping that in mind, those are second wave, and that, you think of that Peruvian skull with the back flattened, those are who we call the Dinarics, and we can place the Dinarics in Jerusalem as one of the accounted giant tribes that they mentioned in the Bible, but we can also find that same skull type at Stonehenge, and then we can find the same skull type around the hinges in the Ohio Valley.
Well, what you're suggesting is that somebody discovered the entire world way before Christopher Columbus or anyone else. It sounds like there was a civilization, and they all had a lot in common. You can tell by the way these burial mounds are lined up. They're lined up to the stars and things of this nature. I find that fascinating. But what is so the elongated skulls, the eyebrows that are over age. Those are some of the things that make these skulls unique. But I also have a buddy, Jim Vieira. He works for he does Ancient American Magazine. He says that often double rows of teeth are listed in the newspaper articles as one of the key characteristics of a lot of these giants.
That does occur, but it actually occurs more often in those earlier, what I'm going to call the Maritime Archaic, and that is that 7,000 BC wave. But we find the same kind of skull types on the California coast as we do in Connecticut, that we find in Florida. And then eventually those people pushed into the Great Lakes region, so we'll find it somewhere up here where I am on the southern tier of Lake Michigan, and then certainly up there in your direction, Michigan, New York. So there's kind of this northern tier that also included all the coastal regions, and that's that Maritime Archaic coming from both the west across the Aleutians and then over from the north of coming in through Labrador. But it's interesting that they're all the same skull type, and that double rows of teeth occurs more often in that earlier wave.
Well, I find that fascinating. 7,000 years ago, that's around the time of Nimrod in the ancient Babylonian mystery religion. And I know that there is some Babylonian influence as far as the numerology goes when it comes to these giants. Am I correct in that?
Well, now that would be within the geometric earthworks in the Ohio Valley. And for the people that don't know, I mean, these earthworks are massive, generally about 1,050 foot across, where you'd have a circle. And the geometry that they used of squares and circles matches up with what came out of Babylon to represent both the sun deity and the earth mother, and those two entities are real important in the religion of the Ohio Valley. But yeah, there's a numerical codex called Gematria that was started by the Amorites. The Amorites are the accounted giants in the Bible. They controlled Babylon for a period around 1900 BC. But they dictated that 666 was the number for the sun, and 1080 was the number for the Earth Mother, represented by the square. Here in Ohio, we have all these earthworks that are squares, 1080 on each side. We have the sun temples or hinges, and those are either 666 feet or 660 feet. And then we have others that are 555 feet. So it's an incredible coincidence that those would line up. If for some reason they weren't using the foot, and the foot is an ancient way of measurement, and it's a base 12, which is called a duodecimal numbering system, the base 12, which we still use today in our clocks, and we use it in our calendars. But that base 12 was started by the Amorites. But yeah, the numbers match up, and not a couple of earthworks, but it is pretty profound and pretty prolific through most of the earthworks in the Ohio Valley where those numbers show up.
My question is what happened to all the skeletons and all the evidence of the bones? I can tell you from my research, because I've done extensive research on this as well, is that they just go missing. They either were in a museum and then they got snagged up by the Smithsonian Institute, or they were allegedly returned to tribes and the tribes never received them, or the tribes did receive them and or will not let anyone view them. So that seems to be the common theme when it comes to these giant skeletons. These mounds are fantastic, though. I don't mean to go away too much from the question, but I want to mention that these mounds and the way they buried each other, it seems to be very unique.
It was, and we find things like beehive tombs in some of these that actually had a keystone at the top, and some really unique burial chambers that were within some of them. Some in West Virginia we have doorway lintels, which are almost identical to what you would find in megalithic England. So there's a lot of similarities in the burial types, the mound types. Mound types where you have a mound with a circle around it, and we find that all over England. So we have skull types, mound types, hinges, and we can match a lot of the cultural what was in England over here. And that's what my book is based on, is that those people did come over here. They were called the Beaker people.
Well, and that's amazing in its of itself, because there are so many stories of these giants. There's so many newspaper articles. I've unearthed hundreds upon hundreds of newspaper articles of finds and mounds being opened. And their particular way of burial is fascinating to me, that they build these mounds to align with planets and astronomy or astrological signs and or planet alignments. And they had this knowledge back then, because from my understanding, Neanderthal man was supposed to be dumb. But from what I'm finding out, they were a lot smarter than, well, in many ways, than man today.
Yeah, and, the Cro-Magnon, it's where, musculoskeletal types would match up more with Cro-Magnons, had larger brains than modern man. And it was this Upper Paleolithic that started advanced mathematics and the first laws. And so there's a lot of stuff in this explosion of knowledge that happened around 3500 BC, and it's associated with this taller race.
And it leads me to wonder, why has this been excluded from history and, banned from any knowledge? We're not taught about this. And like Kristan says, anytime there's evidence or any real debate about it, it's quickly swept under the rug and it's controversial for any type of archaeologists or whatever. Yeah.
Well, it has been deemed diffusionist of people that are saying that anyone else came over here other than, original Native Americans over the Bridge Ice Bridge as politically incorrect. And we all know what power that and influence that has over the paradigm of what people are allowed to know these days.
Isn't this really science? How can you limit, science? If there was something else, then people should be free to discover what existed prior to us. And, placing limitations on that, we see the organizations. Kristan, you mentioned already the Smithsonian Institute. So, they have a lot of money. I'm sure that they can hide things.
And they also have ties to a lot of the Babylonian beliefs because a lot of people on the board really tie into the Skull and Bones, which also is Mystery Babylon.
I'm not trying to throw them under the bus.
I know,
I'm just saying, that's one of those organizations, not to mention, private money as well, that can just, make these things go away and then there's no questions anymore.
To look at what the news is today with the movie that they canceled the release because it was deemed as politically insensitive to the North Koreans. And so, this political correct thing has a lot of influence, and
it's the Koreans, though. I mean, seriously, it's the freaking Koreans. I mean, they're like the most evil North Koreans. They're the most evil, and
I'm glad you clarified that.
No, I just
necessary.
It is. But what are we gonna do? I'm gonna watch Team America North. Was it Team America World Police there? Because that's what we become. Number one.
It's really about propaganda, though. I think this is a big PR stunt.
It is. It's the Reds. Yeah.
But it shows you that manipulation, that ability to, have people look the other way, like, just don't worry about this. It's really going to convince more people to buy the movie, I think.
Maybe that's the plan. It's a scam to get everyone to really pay attention to the movie. Who knows?
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, probably inevitably it's going to, but you can just see the sway. It's like, are you kidding me? We're not going to release a movie because it's politically insensitive to the North Koreans of all people. But it gives you an example of what I'm talking about. It's like, oh, yeah, it's a tough hurdle. And you're going to message out there.
You're going to have these hurdles. You're going to have people. The question I have to ask is, how did we get here? How do we get to a point that we're worried about what the most evil dictator of North Korea has to say and how he feels about us offing him in a fictitious movie? As far as I'm concerned, that is the most ridiculous and suppression of freedom of speech I've ever heard.
I know, but that was the key word. How did it make them feel? Well, that's important these days. How do you feel about things?
Well, and that's
if something makes someone feel bad, then, you can't diffuse that information because it makes this group of people feel bad. Well, we can't have that,
Well, that goes for
that's
science,
more important
too.
than the truth.
You see that in science all the time. Look how quick people are to ridicule someone instead of actually looking at the information and evidence at hand. Often too much ridicule is used as a tool to discredit people, and in all reality, it's really being used to hide things like the truth, especially in this instance where we're finding redundant information on giant human skeletons, and we're seeing, like we mentioned, the downfall of overall society here with all this.
Well, one thing is that you have the university archaeologists, and the university line is Beringia. So you are not going to go and get a job as a university professor and write papers on diffusion and think you're going to get published. You're going to be ostracized, not published, in perish and published world that they live in. It's like suicide as far as your career goes. So that's where they've kind of cornered themselves into of like, well, you can't have a dissenting opinion in that world, this academic world. So, you're up against that.
That's very interesting. Hey, I wanted to field a question from the chat. One of our listeners wants to know what is the tie to giants and characters like Goliath, and what was the environment atmosphere like back then that allowed people to grow so tall, or in reptiles, etc.?
Well, around 10,000 BC, there were a lot of really big animals. And I don't know if the atmosphere had a lot to do with that. Goliath is the most famous of the giants, but in the Bible, he was around much later. The giants have been gone for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it says in there he was a remnant. So he's kind of like a generational, he was big because in his bloodline he had that. But there weren't a lot of giants running around back then.
And he was different from the Anak, right? The Anunnaki, which is tied to Sumerians.
Yeah. Yeah. He was from them, but this is kind of way after all the story of the giants had all played out. So many years after that. Well, and that's the most famous giant in the Bible, yes.
Well, absolutely. And, there's been giants in history. Let's not forget in Greek history, they had the Cyclopean giants, cut them down to size and things like that nature. My question to you is, what evidence is there out there today that supports the theory that there was a giant civilization that once roamed the earth? I know that I personally have found a bunch of news articles, but people still want to know at the end of the day, what's the evidence? What's the physical science behind it proving that people were larger at one time? Sometimes I found in some newspaper articles, like in Mexico, they had 32 feet tall. And then in, Texas, we had 18, in Wisconsin, 9 to 15 feet tall. How tall did people get also?
I didn't publish anything that was over. I think there was one account in Michigan that was 11, but the largest group of giants that I really think was legit was about 9.5 feet. So if you see something 15 foot, 20 foot, those are bunk. Those are not true. The majority of the giants be around 8 foot, a lot of 7-footers, a few 9-footers, but probably 7.5, 8 foot would be, if we were going to say giants, it would fall more in that range. So kind of watch those, 18 foot, 20 foot. There's just no evidence for that. And, in a lot of these histories, especially the county histories, these history books went to some of the most affluent residents in a county. And generally when they were describing these digs and the large skeletons they found, a lot of times judges were there, there were doctors that were there, examined the bones. So they were good witnesses, to have found and described and measured, these remains. Finding the actual physical remains is a little tougher. Like you said, the Smithsonian gobbled a bunch of them up. Some of them would end up in the county surveyor's, office in a county, and we just don't know what happened to it. A lot of them crumbled. They would be measured and were more of like a chalky substance, and they just, there wasn't enough there to keep. So the search is on for, the actual 8-foot skeleton, but we'll find it.
Well, I'm sure it's out there. We have tall people every day. There's tall people today, and I'm sure there's going to be more tall people as we go on. But the thought that there was a race of hundreds of people who are tall. Did you hear, I have to throw this out there, did you hear about the Egyptian giant recently unearthed? I guess there was supposedly a 7-foot some tall giant unearthed in Egypt. I've been seeing it all over.
I heard it was multiple.
Yeah,
I
it was
believe.
multiple.
I'll try to find that article right now.
But I find it incredibly interesting.
And they had blonde and red hair also.
Well, that's interesting. That is very interesting.
And that would have been more of the Semitic people, and these people have been drawn on Egyptian walls. They were tall, and they had red hair, they had blonde hair. I've seen pictures of blonde-haired women in Egyptian paintings, and that would be more closely to who we would know as the Amorites. The Tocharian mummies, if you ever see a picture of that, that guy was 6'7", and he would have been related to these Amorites. But that's an actual, mummy that you can look at, see what they look like.
Well, and that's fascinating. And all throughout history, they've been digging these up. I'm sure a lot of these skeletons may have ended up in freak shows and carnivals, and who knows what else is out there that people really move to. But a 12-foot tall person, they could lift an extraordinary amount of weight, couldn't they? They could also have helped with a lot of the immense large structure. We see these 20,000-ton megaliths and blocks that there's no way any normal human could have ever built or made. Where did these giants come from? Is this opposite of what they teach us with evolution, or is this part of evolution?
In the book on the Nephilim Chronicles, I have about 8 or 9 accounts of Cro-Magnon skeletons, which are going to date prior to about 10,000 BC, of being over 7 foot, 7.5 foot, plenty of, 6.5 footers. And so if we want to look for that genetic stuff that we need to make a giant, we have to go to that Upper Paleolithic Cro-Magnon race. And scientists, archaeologists would say, well, Cro-Magnon was gone by 10,000 BC, and that's absolutely wrong. So really what we're looking at when we're looking at the Amorites and the account of giants in the Bible, the large skeletons that have been found all over area around Stonehenge, we're basically looking at Cro-Magnon, that they lasted much, much longer than that 10,000 BC. But that's the genetic stuff of the giants.
And it's just so interesting that all this is just now starting to reach us with the internet. And I did actually find the article, and it says that there was researchers there to database all of this, and it said that actually they were grouped by their hair color. There was blondes and reds, and the way they were buried was based on their hair color.
Isn't that weird?
Native Americans have story of there being a red-haired race, a blonde-haired race that was very tall. And it's pervasive with the Native Americans, and it's part of their folklore. And they associate these people with the burial mounds. But that's dismissed because, that doesn't fit the paradigm that the universities want to exploit.
And, for people that don't think that this is relevant, this article that we're talking about right now is literally from today. So this isn't like some old article that we're talking about, like, oh, they found all these things like 30 years ago. No, the article is from today, December 18th. Just to throw that out there.
What is the year that, did they have a date of how old those skeletons were?
Roughly 1,500 years, I believe, if I remember right. I'm not quite sure. I believe it was about 1,500, which makes sense because it's slow de-evolution. If the human beings were, like the Vikings, between 8 and 10 feet tall or 11 feet tall, like the Romans claimed, or 12 feet tall. Not the Romans themselves, but when they fought the Celts. You find this information fascinating that even at 7 feet, 1,500 years, that makes some kind of logical sense to me.
Well, and Kristan, I hate to just swing back to this article, but it's the idea that there's so many, 1 million people there, mummified and they're just thrown in there by hair color. This is freaking me out, guys. Bizarre. This is making me feel strange. I don't know what the hell's going on here, Fritz.
See, the fact that there were blonde-haired and red-haired people, that is really hidden. And even if you watch, the Discovery Channel, who, change the skull type of Tutankhamun, and they kind of always give you this generic-looking person of Egypt, And that's another thing they just don't want to reveal, you know. Ramses had red hair. Tutankhamun's mother, I think, had blonde hair. And, you know, that's just hidden. You know, again, we're like dealing with this politically correct, sensitive thing. And so we don't have science anymore that says, oh, this is just the way it was. It was like, no, everything's got to be based on some sort of political ideal of who we're giving this to or who we're giving that to. So, yeah, the blonde hair thing. Yeah, they're there because that's who, you know, built those pyramids.
Yeah, and you know, it's just hidden from history, and it's no longer relevant apparently until literally today, and now people want to talk about it. And no, you know, I think there's a lot of research, and you guys have been, you know, dedicated to this topic, and it's so amazing to me that we don't know more about this stuff. It's like this is right out in the open, and there's so many people. I know listeners to this show right now are probably like, oh, giants, you know, ho hum, but I'm reading about this and it's just bizarre.
Well, why suppress the information as well? Why not just let people know that, you know, obviously evolution is not 100% correct in the fact that...
1 million bodies mummified with brains and stuff still intact. I mean, that is... and not to mention the size. Multiple of the 1,700 that they've taken out have been over 7 feet tall.
Hey, and what is over 7 feet? Over 7 feet could be 8, 9, 10, 11.
True.
We don't know what over 7 feet means
either. They said
either.
over 7 feet.
Then let's not forget that a lot of these Egyptian princes and kings are often depicted with elongated heads and taller in stature, where the servants would only come up to their knees or their waistline. And I don't think that was by chance. I think maybe people were actually, you know, writing on the walls what they actually saw.
It says by every 5 by 5 square meter, there was at least 40 bodies found in every 5 by 5 square meter.
That almost sounds like like they were buried, though, as a burial grounds. It wasn't like a war was fought there.
Well, that's what I'm wondering about this, because why would all these people be grouped in this area like this? And it doesn't seem like it would be a disaster because they wouldn't be neatly placed there. So it's interesting, Fritz.
It is because, you know, everything ends here in the Ohio Valley, and as far as the mound building culture goes, right around 500 BC or 500 AD, which is that 1,500 years ago that you're talking about. So it's an interesting correlation that when it ends there, then all of a sudden all these tall people show up in Egypt. Maybe they went home.
Or they came to the United States, who knows? But what happened to all the giants? You know, obviously we see the skeletons, but why do we not have giants today? Why are people? Why isn't there a random person?
We must have.
Well, yeah, well, the book spoke of this. That's the reason why we had giants, is because supposedly Watchers mated with humans, and they brought forth the men of renown and Nephilim. That's off the books of Enoch, which is an amazing series, by the way, to our listeners. If you have not read the books of Enoch, it shows that ancient man had much more knowledge than they lead on in you know, modern day history class.
And you know, also the secrets that was given to the giant race was mathematics, how to work metals, and it just so happens that we have this really big movement at the Copper Age. We also have the copper being mined out of Isle St. Royal, where there's something like 50,000 tons they can't account for. But the following of the moon, well, we have earthworks in the Ohio Valley that do that. The following of the sun, well, the hinges are all aligned to solar events in England and in the Ohio Valley. So you really can look at those secrets done or given and talked about in the book of Enoch to the Nephilim. And it's a checklist of everything that's going on in the Ohio Valley and everything that's going on around Stonehenge.
Well,
they
and
utilize all of those secrets.
And I find it interesting you mentioned sun worship. I think that really ties into the modern day Luciferian worship. Even Sunday is the day people worship the sun because it's a day in birth of Nimrod. And in my opinion, may have been a giant as well. Yes, so well, obviously that all ties into the ancient Babylonian mystery religion, which I believe actually stems maybe from these Nephilim, because there's a lot of serpent worship. Isn't there serpent mounds in Ohio?
There's serpents everywhere, and most of the earthworks, and I certainly point that out, are serpent effigies. So you have the famous serpent, but Fort Hill is shaped like a serpent. Mounds State Park Henge is shaped like a serpent. There's some smaller works around Newark that are shaped like serpents. Serpents are everywhere in the Ohio Valley. Yes.
Well, and not only that, the other thing that really touches base with the Babylonian mystery religion that I remember very much is human sacrifice and cannibalism, which I remember most stories as a kid where you learned about giants are always trying to put you in a pot and cook you, right?
Yes, and, that is, and we have bones in the Ohio Valley where they would put all the skeletons in like a spoke pattern to make like a sunburst, but some wouldn't have heads. They would bury them without heads, and so there was there's some really crazy things that they find in the mounds and evidence that cannibalism, taking somebody's head, that's some sort of like to be a servant into the netherworld. So some interesting things.
Well, and I wanted to point out too, we had a guest on, Bruce Fenton, and he actually was focused on like artifacts and giant tools, and he actually discovered tools and what looked to be like a hammer that was really big and things like that. So, what happened to all their tools and stuff?
Well, we do find those. I was just at a conference with Wayne May, who's a publisher of Ancient American Magazine. He was showing me this axe head. This thing must have weighed like 30 pounds. And who could swing that except for somebody that was really big?
I could swing it. I got the muscles. Not really. That's a lot of weight. That's like a salt bag. Like
you need 2 or 3 Cristons for that.
Yes.
There's a lot of periphery evidence like that. Large tools, so monster-sized tools. It would have taken quite a man to swing.
Well, and not only that, there's all these structures and things that we can't really explain out there. I know with Bruce Fenton, it was interesting because he was in Ecuador and he found what looked to be like a hill, but it turns out a lot of these big mountains that we're finding across the United States are actually pyramids underneath. So, and that's what he found in Ecuador.
Ohio Valley, point out and, show you the different earthworks and show you how they had to know pi and square root of numbers to build these geometric earthworks in the Ohio Valley. Well, where do you think that came from? And isn't it quite a coincidence that it was the accountants in the Bibles of Amorites who developed this advanced mathematics? And with a theory, it was those people that came here. And then here we have these earthworks where they were using the advanced mathematics. That wasn't indigenous. That didn't just come from here. Somebody brought that knowledge here.
Well, and mathematics is explained in the books of Enoch that was taught to them by the Watchers and those who landed on Earth, obviously as prior knowledge and given to man. I think that's very interesting as well, that there again shows that we were much more advanced as a race in history. I read your book, and your book was fantastic. I want to mention it has a lot of this information. So what's so important about the number 666? I know it's also important in secret societies such as Masonry and sacred geometry and things of that nature. But what is so important about that number?
Why it was important to them? They came up with that. They had something called a magic square where you would add all these numbers up in a square and it would add up to 111, and then each box had 6 rows to make this 666. But they have that. It shows up in the Bible 3 times. And one time they bring Solomon 666 talents of gold, and we look at the name Solomon where it's Sol, Latin for sun, Am, Hindi for sun, An, Egyptian for sun. That his name means son, and he gets 666. There's another, it's Adonakam, and he's fleeing Babylon, and with him are 666 people. And Adonakam is probably a reference to Adonis, a Phoenician sun god. So we do have 666 in the Bible twice in reference to the sun, and then what most people are familiar with is Revelation, where if you read it, though, it says, let he who hath understanding count the number. And so if we look who's persecuting the Christians at the time, it's the Romans. We take their numerical system and count 500, 150, 1051, we get 666. So that 666 is in direct reference to Rome and not the sun. But another interesting point in there in Genesis 11:1, so we have 111. It says, and now the whole world had one language. It's my belief that that language is mathematics, and that the Genesis 11:1, 111 is in reference to that, and it's in reference to
interesting.
the Gematria numerology.
That's very interesting. I never heard that theory before, but that does make sense. Math is universal. In fact, it is everywhere in the universe. That's one thing that the books of Enoch explain, that the way the planets rotate and move around each other is all math. And, I think it's really funny how the serpent worship and Luciferian sun worship, because a lot of people believe the sun is Lucifer, or Nimrod, at least, who was worshipped as a sun about 7,000 or 10,000 years ago, how it was carried on. And even Nimrod got his religion from Semiramis' wife, who got it from somewhere, the ancient Babylonian mystery schools, which, in my belief, all stem from the Luciferianism that these giants and Nephilim brought with them. Obviously, that's obviously a big part of history for them.
That, and along with the sacred geometry of just very simple, the circle and the square. In Ohio, they have these massive earthworks where it's a circle and a square that are attached. And the circle and the square are of equal areas. And to do that, you have to be able to square a circle, which, is advanced mathematics, more advanced than what I possess. But they were able to do that. And then they're equal because you have what everyone's familiar with, the yin-yang, or the sacred marriage. And so their whole religion was based on that there's always equal proportion of sun and earth mother. And you can really get into that and see that when you visit the earthworks. And I try to provide that of sacred landscapes and what to look for when you go to sites, and looking for springs and, different things that, made up this sacred ground where these earthworks occur. So the river's a little bit deep. It's kind of simple, but to know what to look for will enhance your visit if you do travel to some of these mound and earthwork sites.
That's fantastic, Fritz Zimmerman, author of multiple books. Do you have any final thoughts for us as we're running out of time here? I want to give you a chance to, plug your book, plug your website, and give us some final thoughts here in the Rundown Live. Why should people believe in giants? What kind of research should they do? And where can people find out more information about this subject?
Well, I just want to tell it's not a list of giants where you're going to get science. I'm going to show you examples. I'm going to show you skull types. And so it's not a list, and it's really going to give you an opportunity to kind of get inside of the head of these people, to know the difference between the earlier giants, the later giants, so determine what giants maybe lived in your community at one time. This is the Nephilim Chronicles, Fallen Angels in the Ohio Valley, and then the travel guide that I have also, 222 sites in 5 states, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, and Michigan.
Wisconsin didn't make it? No, I'm just kidding. I had to give you a hard time.
No, but I've been to a couple sites up there. But so I have all the mounds. I think there's a couple books out there. They have about 70. So I have 222. For every mound you go to, you'll pass by 3. And that's on Amazon. Both books are on Amazon. Other than that, I'd just like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas.
Well, thanks, Fritz. Do you think that a giant human skeleton larger than 7 feet, maybe larger than 9 feet, will be unearthed anytime soon, considering about how much these have been riddled amongst the United States, or where you can find them in newspapers anyways all over the United States? You'd figure that these would be quite easy to find, and people would still find them today, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I think they do. It will, because I think people are looking for them, but it's a pretty scary proposition. If you were going to get the beat down, the first person that comes up with one, that's going to be tough.
They're going to get hammered by everyone, yeah.
They got NAGPRA and everything else, and so it's going to have to be somebody that finds one by mistake.
And I'm still waiting to find out what happens here in Egypt. They got 1 million more bodies to exhumed there. So let's see what they find. I mean, that's
And
going to be interesting.
They don't tell you what over 7 feet really is. Is it 8 feet, 9 feet, 10 feet, or is it 7 foot 1 inches?
Fritz Zimmerman, author, we appreciate your time tonight. It was a pleasure having you on.
Awesome conversation, as always.
Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks again for coming on the Rundown Live. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah,
Fritz.
we'll be politically
Keep
incorrect
contact.
anytime around here.
Yes. And that's about it. Thanks again for joining us, Fritz, and we'll have to have you back soon to talk Giants. We could talk more Nephilim or any other topics that are important to you, buddy.
There goes Fritz Zimmerman. Yeah, definitely an interesting talk, Kristan.
Yeah, definitely. I find it interesting that there are so many of these races around the United States, but yet no one talks about them. They don't teach burial mounds in history. I find that
Well,
great.
this Egypt one is freaking me out, bro. It's freaking
Well,
me out.
I already knew about this. I was already all prepared about this. But if you want a list of people who are supposedly giants in history, like he mentioned, he doesn't do that. He sticks with the facts. The things that he can prove, which I respect, and I think that's the way to go. I also recommend checking out Steve Quayle because he has a book listed with a bunch of giants in history, allegedly. So,
Yeah, it's just one of those topics. I like the idea of basing it on facts. And
we all do. We all do.
you know, evidence is necessary in a topic like this.
Well, was Paul Bunyan really 9 feet tall, cutting down trees in like 3
I don't
hacks?
know, but I know that, why are these bodies, why is there a million bodies ordered, with hair color? That's freaking me out, dude. That's freaking me out.
Well, it all ties. It's very similar to in the Indians here in America. We have
Freaking me out, bro! I'm freaked out on the rundown.
I think it has to do with bloodlines and race, maybe, Mike.
I mean, do you realize what we're talking about here? There's
We're talking a
mummified
mass
bodies.
graveyard, a million
A
mummified.
million mummified bodies with red and blonde hair in Egypt, with red and blonde hair ordered by their hair color. I mean, this is bizarre.
Well,
what the hell?
Maybe they knew the flood was coming. I don't know. I have no idea. But I do know that there's got to be
We know
some kind of
nothing about
explanation.
actual history.
Yes, there has to be some kind of explanation out there, and I'm sure if there is one, we'll never know the
And this
truth.
is on mainstream news. You can Google this right now. It's on RT,
Giants in
IntelliHub. There's a lot of mainstream sites covering this, IB Times. So, I mean, it's more of an international story. You're not going to see this on, CNN. They're not going to be telling you about the weird red-haired, blonde-haired giant race of people that live underneath the pyramids. Who, we had people come on the show telling us there's people living under the pyramids, Kristan.
Gabriel, yeah.
Yeah,
Richard
so I mean,
Gabriel.
I don't know what the
and
hell's
he's been
going on
down in
anymore.
those caves, actually. He's one of the most well-known pyramid researchers out there. He lives in Egypt.
And then yesterday,
anyways,
the Earth was hollow. I mean, Bruce Agnew, you know what I mean? Which was an
Agnew,
awesome interview. If you guys missed that, that's up on the
One of my
site,
favorites.
YouTube,
Yeah.
and Libsyn. Yes, definitely a great talk. And as well tonight, the Giants, it wasn't my thing, but Kristan, you've slowly convinced me, and, maybe it's like, hopefully, the same thing I can do with government for you.
well, one thing I have to say is that we don't agree with everything our callers and guests have on the show. As most people know, I believe that that there are giants larger than 12 feet tall, so.
We got to get out of here, though. It's Thursday. We're going to be back tomorrow. Open lines and ranting. We want to hear rants from the callers, our favorites in the chat. We do love all of you in the chat, by the way, and we want to get your calls tomorrow. It's Friday. We're going to be hanging out, having a good time, and ranting, I'm sure, because that's what we do best around here.
Yeah, guys, send us your guest requests.
We're going to rant, Kristan. I can't wait till Friday so I can just rant.
I just want to rant.
I just gotta do it.
Things are bad, and I'm sick of it.
I wanted to see that Rogan movie so bad, and I'm freaking out.
Joe Rogan watches the
Seth
Rundown
Rogen.
Live.
Oh no, yeah. Istan was over on Joe Rogan Experience. Our
This
buddy.
isn't the first time this had to Andrew
I
Dunner.
really want to get Mr. Rogan on the podcast. That would be awesome.
Do you think he'd actually come on the show?
I think he would.
Maybe we should ask him.
I gotta just get the right contact.
Well,
If
you're
I
the
could-
Joe Rogan fan. Send him an email.
Yeah, I gotta get a hold. There's a lot of awesome guests we gotta get, but that's coming in the year, and we'll get them. That's how we do it around here. And we're gonna have real conversations and talk about real things because we're real people and we got real listeners and just a real rundown, though.
Hey there, Day. Yeah, right? Some Wisconsin there for everyone.
So anyway, don't forget about the Encore, FPRN Radio, FPRNradio.com, 12 a.m. Central, 1 a.m. Eastern. Also, our newest affiliates, LibertyTalkRadio.fm, LibertyMovementRadio.com. Check those out as well. Our site's The Rundown Live. Anything else, Kristan? Otherwise, we're out of here till tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm really disappointed that I didn't report the 1 million mummified bodies. I'm normally on top of that stuff. But major plug to, Ancient Origins, who really got the news out there first. I saw that they really plugged it really early. So.
And IntelliHub, that's where we are reading the article from today. Also
Friday,
publishes
13
on our
Eastern,
site.
6
They're
p.m.
affiliates of
Pacific.
ours now.
Check out the rundownlive.com.
RundownLive.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Give us your calls, open lines. Special thanks to Fritz Zimmerman, author, for coming on.
Learn about giants. Eat a lot of food. Get tall.
Mike P. Kristan H. The Rundown, Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Check out